I always thought I had a perfect life. My name is Mark, and I was married to Rachel for 5 years. We had a charming little house in the suburbs, a cat named Whiskers, and a solid routine that worked for us. I thought we were happy, but looking back, I see the signs now that I was just too blind to notice. Rachel's laughter started to sound a little hollow. Her texts were often hidden behind the screen of her phone, and late nights at work became more frequent. Initially, I shrugged it off as the typical hustle and bustle of adult life. We all get busy, right? But deep down, a nagging feeling began to eat at me. The first real crack in our seemingly perfect life came when I noticed Rachel getting unusually defensive about her phone. She'd never been secretive before, but suddenly, it was like she had a fortress built around her device. I'd catch her texting quickly and then shoving the phone into her pocket whenever I walked into the room. It felt odd, but I didn't want to be the paranoid husband jumping to conclusions without evidence. I tried to convince myself that maybe she was planning a surprise for me or something. But the little things began adding up like pieces of a puzzle I wasn't ready to solve. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I got home earlier than expected. I expected to find Rachel in the kitchen cooking dinner or maybe curled up with Whiskers on the couch, but instead, I found the house empty and eerily quiet. I checked my phone for any messages, thinking she might have gotten caught up with a friend, but there was nothing. I felt a crawl of unease. Something was off. As I wandered through the house, I noticed Rachel's purse sitting on the kitchen counter. I don't know what made me do it, but I opened it. Inside, I discovered an envelope that wasn't mine. It was addressed to her from a hotel I recognized in the city. My heart sank. I pulled out my phone and Googled the hotel, and what I found turned my world upside down. The hotel had a reputation for being a romantic getaway, a place where people snuck away for illicit affairs. That moment was like a slap in the face. I remember feeling a mix of disbelief and anger surge within me. My first instinct was to confront her right then and there, but I held back. I needed more proof, evidence that would make her own the truth when I confronted her. I decided to wait until the next day. The next evening was a sleepless one. I could barely focus on anything, and when Rachel finally came home, she looked flushed and uncharacteristically happy. My stomach turned. We sat down for dinner and I tried to act normal, but I could feel the tension radiating from me. I was waiting for the right moment. After dinner, as she was cleaning up, I decided to drop the bomb. "Hey Rachel, I found something in your purse yesterday." Her expression shifted immediately. One second she was a carefree wife, and the next, a deer caught in headlights. I pulled out the envelope and laid it on the table between us. Care to explain? Rachel's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of confessing, she turned into this defensive wall. "What? That's just a stupid promotional thing. You're reading way too much into this, Mark." She laughed it off, her voice a shrill attempt at calmness that only made my blood boil. "Stupid promotional thing. A hotel envelope, Rachel, really?" I shot back, feeling all the anger I had been holding back explode. She no longer seemed like the wife I loved. She had transformed into someone I'd never met. "Why are you being so dramatic?" she snapped. "You're always so paranoid. You really think I'd cheat on you?" I felt like a fool, caught in the middle of a storm of emotions. "You don't understand, do you? Something been off for a while now, and I can't just ignore it." "Whatever, Mark. You're just trying to pick a fight," she retorted, crossing her arms. The confrontation left me feeling like I was losing a battle I never wanted to fight. The woman I loved was here, but she was also a stranger. That night I felt crushed. I had always trusted Rachel, and the idea that she could betray me so casually tormented me. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation like a broken record. I didn't know what to do next. I was filled with anger and disbelief, but deep down there was something else. Fear. Fear of losing everything I thought I had, fear of the pain that would come next. The next few days were like walking through a fog. I tried to act normal, but every time I looked at Rachel, I felt a tempest brewing inside me. I kept replaying the confrontation in my head, wondering if I had missed something crucial. Did I truly want to believe that someone I loved could betray me so deeply? But the evidence was there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living a lie. Rachel continued to dismiss all my concerns, claiming I was overreacting. She'd put on that fake smile, the one she reserved for social events, and it made my skin crawl. I started to notice little things after that. Her late nights at work weren't just work anymore. They were excuses. She began to dress differently, wearing clothes that I had never seen before. She claimed they were just something new, but in my gut, I knew better. I felt like I was in a twisted game where the rules kept changing and I was losing. One afternoon, while she was out grocery shopping, I decided to dig a little deeper. I went to our shared computer and logged into her email account. I know it sounds invasive, but at that moment my heart was racing with a primal instinct to uncover the truth. I browsed through her messages, feeling like a sleuth on a mission. Most of it was mundane, junk mail, promotional offers, and the kind of conversations you'd expect in a married couple's shared life. But then I found it. There was an email from someone named Jake. I recognized that name. Jake was my twin brother. The words on the screen made my heart drop. They spoke in intimate terms, discussing meetings and plans that made it clear they were not just friends. My blood ran cold. I felt like I had been stabbed in the chest. Not only was Rachel cheating on me, but she was having an affair with my own brother. It was surreal, like a scene from a movie that I couldn't believe I was a part of. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever imagined. I felt a mix of rage and despair bubble within me. My mind raced, thinking of all the family gatherings, the laughter we shared, and how I had trusted them both implicitly. How could they do this to me? As the realization set in, I felt the anger morph into something I had never experienced before. I wanted revenge. No, not just revenge. I wanted to erase them both from my life, to reclaim the dignity that I felt slipping away. I knew I had to be smart about this. I couldn't act rashly. I needed a plan. That night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the atmosphere was thick with tension. I could hardly look at her without feeling sick. I watched her laugh at something trivial, her laughter ringing hollow in my ears. The sight only fueled my resolve. I needed to collect more evidence, and I needed to act swiftly. Over the next few weeks, I transformed into a man on a mission. I took mental notes of Rachel's schedule, paying attention to when she would be at home and when she would be out. I began to investigate further into the relationship she had with Jake, all the while maintaining a facade of normalcy. I contacted a private investigator. Felt extreme, but I was desperate to have something concrete that I could use against them. The investigator promised to gather evidence discreetly, and as I handed over a retainer, I felt a surge of empowerment. Finally, I was taking control of the narrative instead of being a passive victim of betrayal. Meanwhile, Rachel continued to act oblivious, even as I became more distant. She would ask me if everything was okay, trying to coax a smile out of me, but I simply shrugged her off. I couldn't let her see my hand. The betrayal had ignited a fire within me, and I was not going to let it burn out. Then, one Saturday morning, the investigator called with the news I had been waiting for. He had followed Rachel to a hotel, the same one I had found in her purse. He had photos, damning evidence that I could use against her. I felt a mix of triumph and an unsettling dread as I realized the moment of truth was approaching. The day came when I would confront her again, but this time it would be different. I would have the evidence in hand, and I would finally show her that I knew everything. I was ready to end this charade and take back my life. As the hour drew closer, adrenaline coursed through my veins. I was about to confront the woman who had shattered my world and the brother who had betrayed my trust. I knew the confrontation would be explosive, but I was prepared. I had a plan, and the pieces were finally falling into place. The day of reckoning had arrived. I had spent the night packing in our living room, rehearsing the words I needed to say. The photos from the investigator were neatly laid out on the coffee table, a damning collection of evidence that would shatter the illusion Rachel and Jake had crafted. I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. My heart raced as I waited for Rachel to come home. I knew that when she walked through that door, everything would change. When she finally entered, I could tell she was in a good mood. She smiled and asked about my day, but I barely heard her. I was too focused on the confrontation that awaited us. I gestured for her to sit down, and her expression shifted from casual to cautious as she sensed the seriousness of the moment. "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She raised an eyebrow, a slight frown forming on her lips. "What's wrong? You're acting weird," she replied, crossing her arms defensively. "It's about you and Jake," I said, holding up the stack of photos. I could see confusion morph into panic on her face as she glanced at the images. "What are you talking about?" She protested, but I could see the denial fading as realization set in. "I know about the affair," I said, my voice steady as I slid the photos closer to her. "I have proof, Rachel. You can't lie your way out of this." Her expression faltered as she picked up the first photo, her eyes widening as she recognized the scene captured. It was Rachel and Jake, laughing together outside the hotel, caught in a moment of intimacy that spoke volumes about their relationship. I watched as her facade crumbled. She dropped the photo like it was burning her hands. "Mark, please, this isn't what it looks like," she exclaimed, her voice mixture of fear and desperation. "Really? Then what is it?" I shot back, my anger boiling to the surface. "You think I'm stupid. You've been lying to me for months, and now I find out it's with my brother, my own flesh and blood." Tears filled her eyes and she looked genuinely shocked, as if she hadn't anticipated this moment. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Mark. Jake and we have a connection. I swear it was just a mistake." "A mistake?" Those words hit me like a physical blow. "A mistake? You call destroying our marriage a mistake?" I leaned closer, feeling the heat of betrayal radiating off me. "You think I'm going to buy that?" Rachel's demeanor shifted. She went from panic to defensive. "You've been so distant. I was just looking for someone who understood me." "Someone who understood you? You chose my brother. You couldn't even have the decency to find someone outside of our family." My voice echoed in the room, a cacophony of betrayal and hurt. I was at a crossroads. I could either let her weave her web of excuses or take charge of the situation. "Mark, please," she begged, her voice trembling. "I'll end it with Jake, I promise. We can fix this. I love you." Love. The word felt like a bitter joke now. I had dedicated my life to building a future with her, only to discover she had been playing me for a fool. "Love, you've got a funny way of showing it." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. I needed to focus on the outcome I wanted, and right now, that meant making her realize the gravity of what she had done. "I can't do this anymore, Rachel. You've shattered the trust we built. I can't go back to pretending everything is fine." Her tears flowed freely now, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow watching her break down. I didn't want to be the villain in this story, but I knew I had to stand my ground. "I want a divorce," I said firmly, the words hanging heavily in the air. "Please don't say that," she cried, reaching for my hand. "We can work through this. I can change. Just give me another chance." I jerked my hand away, refusing to let her manipulation draw me back in. "You had your chance, Rachel. You've made your choice. I won't be your backup plan while you explore your connection with my brother." The fight left her, and she slumped back in her chair, defeated. I could feel the emotional weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. We were two people who had once loved each other, now reduced to this painful confrontation. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear her sobs, but I was unmoved. I had made my decision, and I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking control of my life. "Mark, I'm so sorry," Rachel finally managed, her voice choked with tears. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." "It doesn't matter anymore," I replied, feeling a sense of finality. "You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." I stood up, feeling a surge of determination. "I need space. I'll be staying with a friend for a while." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Rachel behind her, sobs echoing in the empty room. As I stepped out into the night, a mix of emotions swirled within me. I felt liberated, but there was also a heaviness in my chest. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had to forge my own way. I was done being a pawn in their twisted game. Now it was time for me to reclaim my life. That night, I stayed at my friend Dave's place. He was a good guy, the kind of friend who always had my back, no matter what. I didn't go into details about what had happened. I just told him I needed some space, and honestly, that was all he needed to know. The moment I walked through his door, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was like stepping out of a suffocating cloud and into fresh air. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake off the reality of what had just unfolded. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation in my mind over and over again. I was consumed by a mixture of anger and heartbreak, desperately trying to reconcile the love I once felt for Rachel with the betrayal I had just experienced. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I talked to Dave a lot, and he helped me process everything. He reminded me that I deserved better, that I shouldn't let Rachel's betrayal define who I was. I started thinking about my next steps, not just in terms of the divorce, but in terms of my life as a whole. I realized that this could be an opportunity for a fresh start, a chance to redefine who I was without Rachel. I began by focusing on myself. I hit the gym more. Working out became an outlet for my frustration and anger. I also started to reconnect with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years, but who always made me feel good about myself. It was like I had been living in a bubble, and now that I had burst it, I was finally free to breathe. Despite the initial high of newfound freedom, I couldn't escape the reality of my situation. I had to face Rachel again soon. We needed to discuss the logistics of the divorce. I was nervous about that conversation. I knew I had to be firm and stick to my guns, but part of me still felt a tug of sympathy for her. The love I had for her was still there, albeit buried under layers of betrayal and hurt. When the day finally came for us to meet, I had steeled myself for an emotional confrontation. We agreed to meet at a cafe halfway between our homes. As I drove there, my stomach churned with anxiety. I reminded myself why I was doing this. I was taking back my life. When I arrived, Rachel was already there, sitting at a table and looking nervous. She seemed smaller somehow, like the weight of everything was finally starting to settle in. I took a deep breath and approached her. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Hey," she replied, her voice shaky as she looked up at me. Her eyes were puffy, and I could tell she had been crying. I had to remind myself that I wasn't there to comfort her. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our decisions hanging heavily between us. I could hear the clinking of cups and the hum of chatter around us, but all I could focus on was Rachel and the reality of our situation. "I've been thinking about everything, and I know we need to talk about the divorce," I said, finally breaking the silence. "I want to make this as easy as possible for both of us." Rachel nodded, her expression shifting between sorrow and remorse. "I know I messed up, and I'm so sorry. I hate that it came to this. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could have both." Those words stung. "You thought you could have both. You thought wrong, Rachel." I leaned forward, trying to suppress my anger. "This isn't just about us anymore. You hurt me, you hurt our marriage, and you hurt my trust." "I know," she whispered. "Rachel, no more excuses," I interrupted. "You made choices that led us here. I won't pretend everything is fine just because you regret it now." Her eyes filled with tears again, and I felt a twinge of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it away. "What do you want to do moving forward?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to make this as easy as possible for you too. I'll sign whatever you need me to," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate that," I replied, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "I want to make sure we both walk away from this with some dignity." We talked logistics, discussing the division of assets and how to handle our shared responsibilities. I was surprised at how smoothly the conversation flowed, considering the emotional turmoil we were both going through. I was prepared for an argument, but instead, we both seemed to have reached an unspoken understanding. As we finalized plans, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure beginning to form. It wasn't the ending I had envisioned, but it was necessary. I stood up to leave, and as I did, I felt a heaviness lift from my shoulders. "Mark," Rachel called after me, her voice trembling. "I really am sorry for everything. I hope one day you can forgive me." I paused, turning back to her. The pain I had felt surged again, but I quickly quelled it. "Maybe someday," I replied, my tone firm but not unkind. "But right now, I need to focus on moving forward." I walked out of the cafe feeling different, lighter perhaps. The confrontation had been difficult, but it had also provided me with the clarity I needed. I was no longer just a victim of betrayal. I was taking control of my future. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope. As I drove away, I couldn't help but think about the lessons I had learned. Trust is fragile, and once it's shattered, it takes more than apologies to mend it. But through this experience, I had discovered my resilience, my ability to rise from the ashes. I was ready to embrace whatever came next. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the process of rebuilding my life. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable, primarily due to Rachel's willingness to cooperate. We had agreed on splitting assets, dividing our furniture, and settling on a fair arrangement for the cat, Whiskers, who had been with us since the beginning. The arrangements felt almost surreal, like I was watching a documentary about someone else's life. I moved into a small apartment downtown, a stark contrast to our suburban house. The change was refreshing. I painted the walls a vibrant blue and filled the space with mismatched furniture I picked up from thrift stores. Each piece carried a story, and I found solace in curating my environment. It was a reflection of me, chaotic yet full of character, just like the journey I was on. I made it a point to step outside my comfort zone. I rejoined the gym, took up cooking classes, and even started going out with friends more often. There was a newfound lightness in my step, a feeling of liberation that I hadn't felt in years. My days were filled with laughter and new experiences, and I slowly began to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. Dave, my lifelong friend, became my go-to support system. We'd hit the bars on weekends, share drinks, and talk until the early hours of the morning. He'd listen to my rants about Rachel and Jake, and he always knew how to lighten the mood. "You're better off without them, man," he'd say with a knowing nod. "You're on the road to bigger and better things." But the road wasn't without its bumps. There were still moments when I'd think of Rachel and the memories we shared, good and bad. I'd find myself holding onto the remnants of our life together, from our favorite songs to the vacations we had taken. But I learned to let those memories come and go, acknowledging the joy they once brought me without allowing them to weigh me down. One evening, I was at a local bar when I bumped into an old college friend, Sarah. She was bright and full of energy, and as we caught up over drinks, I felt an unexpected connection. Talking with her was like stepping back into a time when life was simple and carefree. We laughed, reminisced, and I found myself opening up about my situation. "Honestly, it's been a tough ride," I admitted, looking her directly in the eye. "But I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. I think I'm ready to start dating again, but it's a little daunting." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "You'll be fine, Mark. Just take your time. You're a great guy and someone will be lucky to have you." Encouraged by her warmth, I began to dip my toes into the dating pool. I tried out some dating apps, swiping through profiles with a sense of curiosity rather than desperation. It felt good to be exploring new connections, even if I was still hesitant about diving into a serious relationship. As I started going on dates, I felt exhilarated. Each encounter was different, each woman unique, and I was learning to appreciate the nuances of dating again. I went out with a writer named Lisa who took me to a poetry reading, and another time I met a nurse named Tara who introduced me to the world of hiking. Still, there were moments when I'd think of Rachel and her betrayal. Those thoughts would creep in during quiet moments, making me question if I was truly ready to move on. But then I reminded myself of the reasons I had left, the clarity I'd gained, and how I had taken control of my life. I refused to let Rachel's choices dictate my happiness. Then came the day I received a message from Rachel. It was simple and straightforward, asking if we could meet to discuss some final details regarding the divorce. I felt a jolt of anxiety shoot through me. Part of me wanted to ignore her request, to continue running forward without looking back, but another part recognized that I needed closure. We agreed to meet at a quiet park near my apartment. As I drove over, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I was ready to finalize everything, but I couldn't shake the nervous energy that bubbled beneath the surface. When I arrived, Rachel was already sitting on a bench looking small and subdued. She seemed different, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. I approached her cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Hey," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension palpable. I could see the weight of regret etched on her face, and a part of me wanted to reach out and comfort her, but I knew better. "I wanted to talk about the divorce paperwork," she began, her eyes cast down. "I've signed everything you sent over. I want to make sure it's fair for both of us." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. That's all I ever wanted. For a moment it felt like we were back in that cafe discussing everything that had led us to this point. But this time I was different. I felt stronger, more resolute. I didn't want to get caught in the emotional storm again. "I know I messed up, Mark," Rachel said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I hurt you and I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm really sorry for what I did." "I appreciate the apology," I said, maintaining my composure. "But it doesn't change what happened. I need to move on, and I hope you can find a way to do that too." "Me too," she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I hope you find happiness, Mark. You deserve it." We sat in silence again, both of us processing the moment. I realized that this was not just about closing a chapter. It was about recognizing the lessons learned and the strength gained. I was ready to move forward, and I hoped, for her sake, that she would find her way as well. Finally, we stood, and as we exchanged a final look, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that cafe months ago, heartbroken and lost. I had emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As I walked away from Rachel for the last time, I felt lighter. I was reclaiming my life, and I was ready to thrive. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of excitement about what was to come. The weeks following my final meeting with Rachel were filled with new energy and possibilities. I continued to explore my newfound freedom and started to embrace the changes in my life with open arms. My apartment became a sanctuary, a place where I could reflect on the past while also looking forward to the future. I filled it with laughter, positivity, and small reminders that I was moving forward, not backward. I began dating more seriously, enjoying the excitement of meeting new people and forging new connections. Each woman brought something different to the table, and while none of them were the one, I relished the opportunity to learn about myself through my interactions. I went on hikes, attended art shows, and even tried out a cooking class with a woman named Mia who had a passion for Italian cuisine. Every date reminded me that I was more than just a victim of betrayal. I was a person deserving of joy and adventure. Yet, even as I thrived, there were moments of reflection. I often thought about what had happened with Rachel and Jake, how betrayal can ignite a fire that can either consume you or propel you forward. I knew that I had to find a way to use that pain as fuel for growth, rather than allowing it to become a defining moment in my life. Instead of becoming bitter, I chose to learn from the experience and reshape my understanding of love and trust. I also began attending therapy. It was a gradual decision, but I realized that processing what I had gone through in a healthy way was crucial to my healing. My therapist, Dr. Collins, helped me dissect my feelings and encouraged me to embrace my emotions rather than suppress them. We worked through my anger, confusion, and eventual acceptance. With each session, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders, and I became more at peace with my past. As summer turned to fall, I found myself increasingly optimistic about the future. I started a new job at a marketing firm that allowed me to showcase my creativity. I had always enjoyed writing, but now I was getting paid to do something I loved. The environment was vibrant, filled with energetic people who inspired me to push my limits. I thrived in that atmosphere, collaborating with colleagues and building friendships that extended beyond the office. And then came the day I received an unexpected message. It was from Jake. My heart raced as I opened it. I had not spoken to him since the betrayal, and the last thing I wanted was to dive back into that painful chapter. But curiosity got the better of me. He wanted to meet. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, and even a hint of sympathy. I decided to meet him at a local coffee shop, not because I wanted to rekindle anything, but because I wanted to confront him. I needed to see him face to face to understand the choices he had made and how they had impacted my life. When I arrived, Jake was already seated, his expression a mix of apprehension and guilt. I took a seat across from him, and for a moment we just stared at each other, the silence thick with unspoken words. "Hey, Mark," he finally said, his voice shaky. "Thanks for meeting me." "Let's get straight to it," I replied, cutting through the awkwardness. "Why did you do it?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I messed up, Mark. I can't explain why I made those choices, but I'm sorry. I didn't think about how it would affect you. I never wanted to hurt you." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "But you did hurt me, Jake. You hurt me deeply. You knew what you were doing, and you still chose to betray my trust." "I know," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "I can't change the past, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted to apologize. You were my brother, and I lost sight of that. As I listened to him, something shifted within me. I realized that I didn't need to carry the weight of that anger anymore. Holding on to resentment was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. I had already taken steps toward my own healing, and I didn't want Jake's choices to define my happiness. "I appreciate the apology," I said slowly, weighing my words. "But it doesn't change what happened. I'm moving on with my life, and I hope you can do the same." Jake nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I just wanted you to know how sorry I am. I'll always regret my choices, but I want you to find happiness." As we wrapped up our conversation, I left feeling lighter. I had faced both Rachel and Jake, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my narrative. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of my own future. As fall gave way to winter, I continued to forge ahead, embracing life with open arms. I surrounded myself with supportive friends and pursued passions I had long neglected. I even began writing again, channeling my experiences into stories that reflected my journey. One chilly evening, I sat at my favorite coffee shop, typing away on my laptop. As I wrote, I couldn't help but smile at the resilience I had discovered within myself. Yes, I had been betrayed, but I had also grown stronger. I had learned that love can exist in many forms, and sometimes the greatest love story is the one you write for yourself. In the end, I realized that life was not about the pain we endure, but rather how we choose to rise from it. The heartache had taught me valuable lessons about trust, self-worth, and the importance of moving forward. I was no longer defined by the betrayal. I was thriving, and I was ready for whatever the next chapter had in store.